This is Africa Press. A major twist in global diplomacy is unfolding. Former U.S. President Donald Trump, fresh from his high-profile summit in Alaska with Russian President Vladimir Putin, has dramatically shifted the conversation on Ukraine. His move has left key European capitals and much of the world asking, what comes next? According to reports from BBC and CNN, Trump used the Alaska summit to position himself not as just an American political figure, but as a potential global peacemaker. In his own words, the priority was to move beyond what he called temporary ceasefires that break down, and instead secure what he described as a permanent peace agreement. But what does that mean in practice? And more importantly, who benefits? To answer that, we begin in Kyiv. For civilians enduring daily shelling, the images of Trump shaking hands with Putin in Alaska were difficult to watch. One Kyiv resident, Natalia Lipe, told the BBC she was shocked. In her words, how can you welcome a tyrant like this? How can you roll out the red carpet for the very man responsible for so much destruction? Her words reflect a wider anxiety in Ukraine. Many fear that any deal struck without Ukraine's full participation could undermine its sovereignty. President Volodymyr Zelensky, preparing to travel to Washington for talks with Trump and European leaders, warned publicly that Russia has repeatedly rejected calls for a ceasefire, complicating the path to peace. And yet, Trump's allies claim progress has been made. His envoy, businessman Steve Witkoff, told CNN that Russia had agreed in principle to allow Ukraine to receive what he called robust security guarantees. These guarantees, according to Witkoff, could mirror NATO's Article 5, which treats an attack on one member as an attack on all. At first glance, this sounds historic. But there is a catch. Ukraine still would not be in NATO. Instead, it would rely on new promises from the United States and Europe. Critics argue such promises may be politically fragile, changing with administrations, or depending on future elections. To put this in context, Ukraine's push for NATO membership has been at the center of the war itself. Moscow has long demanded that Ukraine abandon that ambition. If Trump's plan replaces NATO membership with softer guarantees, many wonder, is this a compromise for peace or a concession to Russia? European leaders, meanwhile, are walking a tightrope. They have announced they will join Zelensky in Washington for urgent consultations. In a joint statement, they repeated that Ukraine must have the right to seek NATO membership. But privately, there are concerns that Trump's deal-making style, more transactional than traditional diplomacy, could pressure Europe into accepting terms that favor Moscow. The summit also produced a moment of embarrassment. PR News reported that sensitive U.S. documents were discovered in a hotel business center in Anchorage, Alaska. These papers reportedly included details of meeting times, phone numbers of officials, and travel schedules. Though officials downplayed the incident, it raises questions about how secure and well-organized the summit really was behind closed doors. Beyond the headlines, this moment is about the balance of power. For Putin, meeting Trump in Alaska was a symbolic victory. It showed that despite sanctions, despite being shunned by much of the West, he could still stand shoulder to shoulder with a major American figure. For Trump, it was a chance to present himself, once again, as the man who can strike deals others cannot. But for Ukraine, the stakes are life and death. Every day, Russian missiles target infrastructure, cities, and villages. Every delay in securing a ceasefire means more lives lost. This is why President Zelensky continues to insist that an immediate halt to hostilities is non-negotiable. Permanent peace, he argues, cannot be built without first silencing the guns. Analysts note that Trump's framing, focusing on a permanent peace deal without first securing a ceasefire, could play into Moscow's hands. Without stopping the violence, Russia could continue to gain territory on the battlefield while negotiations drag on. Around the world, reactions have been divided. In Washington, some lawmakers praised Trump's engagement, arguing that dialogue is better than endless war. Others accused him of undermining NATO and weakening Ukraine's leverage. In Brussels, European diplomats emphasized unity, but admitted privately that they are deeply worried about being sidelined by Trump's direct talks with Putin. And here in Africa, leaders and observers are watching closely. The war in Ukraine has disrupted global food supplies, driven up energy prices, and destabilized economies across the global south. Wheat shipments, fertilizer exports, and fuel costs have all been affected. For many African nations, peace in Ukraine is not just a European concern. It is a global necessity. So what happens next? In the coming days, President Zelensky will arrive in Washington. He will meet with Trump and European leaders to discuss whether these so-called robust security guarantees are enough. Will Ukraine accept them as an alternative to NATO membership? Will Russia agree to terms that stop the bloodshed? And will Trump's strategy mark a breakthrough or a breakdown in the pursuit of peace? Tonight, the world is left with more questions than answers. But one thing is clear. The Alaska summit has reshaped the conversation. The war in Ukraine is no longer just about the battlefield. It is about diplomacy, global alliances, and the competing visions of peace. This is Africa Press. We will continue to follow this story, bringing you the latest updates and examining what these shifts in global power mean not only for Europe, but for Africa and for the world.